What is faith? How do I know that if my faith is strong enough? What do we believe? How do I know if I'm even believing the right way? How should I believe? I believe and I believe, but nothing changes. All of us wonder about our faith sometimes, right? And we wonder about it because our frame of reference does not provide us with all the answers. Our frame of reference is filled with what we call life. And it's cluttered with so many things, so many experiences. I mean, think about it. The way you've been raised, what you've been taught, your own brokenness, bad things that happened in your life, all the people and all their opinions in your life. This causes us to look through our frame of reference, and it's blurry, but it determines our faith, how we feel about faith. And it seems as though we want to believe, we think we've already dealt with all these things. We think we've dealt with my own personal hurt and loss, or how my parents raised me, and. But it's impossible to ignore all your life experiences. And it's impossible that your life experiences do not influence what and how you believe. Everything that happens to you creates a filter through which you look at life, how you look at God, and that determines your faith. So in other words, everything you believe is shaped by your own life experiences. And can you just imagine? Every person's life experience is different. So what then? Who has the right faith? And how do I know my faith is strong enough? So to continue this conversation, we're going to look at a book written by someone. Well, it's actually not a book. It's more like a long sermon. And the writer wrote this sermon specifically to believers who were drifting away from what they originally believed. They had also begun questioning their faith. And this book or sermon was so powerful that it was copied and spread throughout the known world at that time. And when the author writes about faith, he makes a very powerful statement. He writes, "We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith." It's as if the writer knew. We look at many things through our frame of reference, and that determines how we feel about faith. And the writer says, don't look at what happened to you. Don't look at the church, because there will always be so many things that don't make sense to you. There will be many things that will distract you, many things you won't understand. But fix your eyes on Jesus, the one who began it all and who finished it. Jesus, the one who makes our faith complete. Jesus, the one who makes our faith what it is supposed to be. Can I ask you, if you wonder whether your faith is strong enough, or if you wonder what you believe or what we believe, or if you wonder if you are even believing correctly, what is your faith based on? What is your faith anchored to? Is your faith perhaps based on your circumstances? How life is going for you? On your own desires and needs? And can I plead with you from now on, would you anchor your faith in Jesus? Not on a church or on faith as an abstract thing, not on people's opinion, not on your life experiences, but on Jesus. I think one of the reasons we wonder about our faith is that we've been taught that faith is something that doesn't go hand in hand with logical thinking. It's almost as if faith is a brain-numbing process. We've been taught, don't think about this or that. Don't try and figure things out. Just believe. We've been taught to look past things that happened to us and pretend that it never happened. Faith became something that denies reality. But Jesus himself said to his disciples, if you struggle to believe in me, then look at the things you have seen and at what was said about me, and let that determine your faith. So I want you to pause and ask yourself, what does faith mean? What is faith? Because I honestly think we have the wrong idea of faith, and that's what makes us confused. And I think guys like me, pastors, we must take responsibility for we have made faith so complicated, so over-theologicalized, and it became confusing. So what is faith? And can we start by saying what faith is not? My friends, faith is not some kind of power or force. As if we believe that faith is like a lasso, that you can throw around God's neck, and if you have enough faith, or if we have enough faith, we can get God to do things He never intended to do. As if we can manipulate God's action through our faith. So, have you ever thought your faith was strong enough to manipulate God into doing something you wanted? Wow, that can leave us with many question marks behind the word faith. Because maybe you've been in a situation where you believed something would happen and you prayed in faith that it will happen, and other people prayed with you good, strong, heartfelt prayers, and God didn't answer. And because God didn't answer, you wondered, is my faith strong enough? I remember when I was a student, there was one of these American people that came to South Africa. It was in the time of all those healing ministries. And I had bad eyesight from childbirth. And I remember going to this meeting with my contact lenses. And I had my contact lens holder with me. And I was convinced that God will heal my eyes. And that evening, I'm sitting in the congregation, and I took out my contact lens holder, and I took out my contact lenses, and man, I'm blind as a bat. So I sat there with my eyes closed, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I said, Lord, if I open my eyes, I will be healed. I have faith in you. I believe in you. God, the time is now. Heal my eyes. And I opened my eyes. And I couldn't see anything. Everything was as blurred as it used to be. And here I am in this massive church, have to find my way to the bathroom so that I can put my contact lenses in again so that I can see. And I thought to myself, wow, thank you, God. I really had faith. But my faith is clearly not strong enough. But my friends, faith is not some force or power we plug into to get what we want. That's just magic. Faith is also not some formula that need to be figured out. There's no secret pin code you have to guess to unlock real faith. It's not something you figure out over a long period of time or achieve when you reach a certain level of Christianity. It's not something you get right if you kneel at it in a certain way or pray in a certain formula. The writer of Hebrews explains what faith is, and he doesn't try to complicate it. On the contrary, he shows that faith is not complicated at all. He writes this, faith shows the reality of what we hope for. Oh, here's a new word, hope. Now there's an English definition of hope. It says, wanting something to be with no guarantee. You hope to get a raise. You hope to get the promotion. You hope to get married one day. Well, maybe you hope to get a date first. So faith is when hope becomes a certainty that it will be so. I'm going to say that again. When hope becomes a certainty that it will be so. But that leads me to another question. What makes hope change into the certainty that it will happen? What needs to happen in us or around us to make us sure that what we hope for will actually take place? And the author goes on and he adds this. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. So he makes the same statement just in another way. How can I be convinced of things I cannot see? And the answer is so simple. He doesn't even give it because everybody knows what it is. Let me explain it like this. How do you know you're going to get that raise you hoped for? Well, you know when your boss tells you that you're going to get it, right? When your boss makes you a promise that you will get a raise, then your hope becomes faith. You go home and you don't say to your wife, I hope I get a raise. No, you say, I'm going to get a raise. Do you already have the money? No, but you know you're going to get it. How do you know? Well, because your boss told you so. How do you know you're going to get married? When you ask her and she said yes. You're not married yet, but you know you're going to get married because she said yes. Back to the text. What the author is saying is this. We must have the certainty that God is who He says He is, and that He will do what He promised He would do. Very important. We don't believe God is who He is because of faith. And we don't believe God keeps His promises because of faith. We believe God is who He is, and we believe He keeps His promises because of evidence. We believe God keeps His promises because He has done it over and over. We have proof of it. Back to Hebrews 11 verse 1 to 2. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is evidence of things we cannot see. It was by faith that the people of old had great reputation. The rest of Hebrews 11 goes through a list of people he mentions, the people of old. These were individuals known to all the readers of this letter, and he says repeatedly, because they believed, they did stuff. God gave a promise to each of these people, and they lived with the assurance that God is who He is, and that He will do what He promised. I encourage you to later on go read through the list of names and discover it for yourself in Hebrews 11. Now, one of these people he mentions is Abraham. God said to Abram, leave your native land, give up your family connections, and I will show you the land you do not know. Abram responded and obeyed because of God's promise. Then he speaks to Gideon, 300 men against a much larger army. Why? Well, God said to Gideon, if you do what I say, I will give you victory. And then Moses, fleeing Egypt with his life. And God told him, hey, if you return, you're going to rescue the people and take them to the promised land. Faith is simple. Faith is the assurance that God is who He says He is, based on evidence, not on faith. And that God keeps His promises because we've got proof that God has kept all His promises. We don't believe because of faith alone. We believe because of evidence. All these heroes of faith responded to God's promises, and their faith is commended. But they did not just believe in the promises God made to them personally. They all believed in God's global promise, the one God made to the whole world. And this promise was made to Abram 2,000 years before Jesus appeared. God promised Abram something, and all the heroes based their lives on this promise. Not just the personal promises God made them. The personal promises did not define their lives. God's global promise did. God said to Abram, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. That was God's promise to Abram. Now here's a quick test. Have you ever heard of Abram before now? Did you know Abram is known all over the world? Even Muslims recognize Abram as the father of their people. 4,000 years after God made that promise to Abram in the desert. And did Abram become a great nation? Yes. And I bet you no one can name another person who became a nation except Abram. And here's a big one. God promised Abram, all the families on earth will be blessed through you. At the time that God made that promise to Abram, nations didn't bless other nations. They conquered, enslaved, and waged war against other nations. One nation was not a blessing to another. So this promise was extraordinarily different for that time. That's what people did with their neighbors. They took what was valuable from others so that they can gain more. But God said to Abram, I will do something new, something completely different from what the world is used to. I will make you a nation, and your nation will not just bless the nations around you. Your nation will be a blessing to the whole world. And my friend, that is the story of Jesus. Jesus is the fulfillment of God's promise to Abram. Across the world, Christians gather to worship Jesus. Across the world, people follow Jesus and they see themselves as blessed. Hebrews 11:13 says, all these people died still believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. They lived their lives knowing that God is who He is and that He keeps His promises He made to them personally. And they believed that God would fulfill His promise to Abraham. One day He will. They didn't know when, it didn't matter. But they knew God keeps His promises because they had repeatedly seen God act. Evidence. As you read the Bible, you see that no one ever tried to use their faith to make God do something. No one used their faith to get their way. No one used faith as a type of magic. They believed that God is who He is and that God keeps His promises. God could not be manipulated by faith. God was reliable. End of story. And that, my friend, was their definition of faith. A man with leprosy, rejected from everyone and considered unclean, came to Jesus and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean. He did not go to Jesus because of faith alone. He went because of evidence. He went to Jesus knowing who Jesus was. He knew Jesus had healed others. And because of what he had heard and seen, he was absolutely certain that Jesus could heal him. Jesus reached out, touched him, and said, I am willing. Faith, not just believing, but knowing that God can. I think the reason we grow up with various ideas of faith, and we think faith is kind of a power we can use to make God what we want to, is because we misunderstand what faith really is. The reason we struggle with faith is that the simple definition of faith, the assurance that God is who He is and that God keeps His promise, it puts God in control and not us. God is in control. And today I thank God that He didn't answer all my 16-year-old prayers. I thank God today that I always didn't get what I wanted. That would have been disastrous. Think about all your requests when you were younger. Thankfully, not everything came true, right? And sometimes they were legitimate requests, painful ones, that God did not answer. And we can't always know why. But what we can know is God is in control. And our faith is not based on our desires or circumstances. Oh, and by the way, remember, no is also an answer. Sometimes God answers our prayers, but not with the answer we want. My faith is not based on what God can do for me. My faith is based on God being who He is and keeping His promises. Faith is not to get God to do what I want. Every time things don't work out the way I want, I question my faith. But really, I'm questioning a faith based on something completely different from what it actually is. There is a whole generation moving away from God because people had attached God's name to promises He never made. Promises like, as long as you believe, everything will work out. Or as long as you trust God, you will have no worries. Think about it. If you grow up thinking God is like a vending machine, you put money in, you pray, you do good things, and then you will get things out. Or if you grew up thinking bad things don't happen to good people, or that God will heal all sickness, or that if you pray with the right kind of faith, then you will get what you ask, then no wonder you question your faith. No wonder you question God and His promises, because you hold God responsible for things He never promised. Here's the good news. God did not demonstrate His love and care for you by promising that nothing bad will happen, or that every sickness will be healed, or by promising a flawless, comfortable life. No. God's promise is filled with far more wonderful things than that. Paul, who once persecuted the church, who wanted nothing to do with Jesus, who lived when Jesus was crucified, so it was a very personal thing for him when he wrote this, but he wrote, "But God showed His great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners." The wonder of God's promise, the proof of God's love was fulfilled through Jesus, who died for us, not through answered prayers. The proof of God's love is not His obedience to your requests. The proof of His love is Jesus on the cross. That is the message. That is the good news. But that's also invitation. At any time you can unfocus from the things that happened in your past, or maybe the things that didn't happen. At any time you can take your eyes off the things that make it hard for you to have faith. And now you can fix your eyes on Jesus and keep your eyes nailed on Him, on what He has done for us. And that's evidence. Jesus Himself said, "All authority on heaven and earth has been given to me." Jesus is our King. God's kingdom has come near, and Jesus is King. God is in control. Jesus is what God promised from the beginning. Now here's why I am so serious about this. The people of old, the heroes of faith we spoke about earlier, they looked forward and they believed. They had not seen it yet. Jesus came long after their time, but they believed anyway. And us? We live on the other side of God's promise. We can look back and see it happened. Jesus was crucified and Jesus rose from the dead. We can believe. My faith is strong enough when I believe that God keeps His promises, and He has. Jesus died, rose again, and is King of all kings. God's kingdom has come near, and Jesus is King. It is now possible to live out heavenly values here on earth. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, through us. We are all invited today again to fix your eyes on Jesus and become like Jesus. There will always be things we will wonder about. There were things we won't fully understand. But the one thing you never have to wonder about again is, where do you stand with God? Look at Jesus. That is where you stand with God. And that must define your faith. 2,000 years ago, in a small town, Bethlehem, God came to show up. He stepped into our frame of reference in a very understandable way, showed us that He is on our side and He loves us. You can believe this. It is proof. John, who lived with Jesus right after Jesus lived with him, he wrote this: "In Him was life, and that life was a light for all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it." there will always be things you will wonder about. There will always be things we don't understand. But the moment you take your eyes off people, of your circumstances, of institutions, of all the brokenness, and focus your eyes on Jesus, when you keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, you will never again have to wonder if your faith is strong enough. Because it is.